Fernan Hale remembered the exact weight of his rented tuxedo, the way the synthetic fabric pulled at his shoulders, how the collar scratched against his neck, like a reminder that he did not belong in expensive things. He remembered the way the holographic flowers flickered above the altar, their petals cycling through impossible colors that only the wealthy could afford to program. He remembered the faces of the guests, corporate executives, biotechnology magnates, and dragon people nobles whose golden scales caught the ambient light like living treasure. Most of all, he remembered waiting. The ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours, Veriscan Standard Time. By 1415, the murmurs had begun. By 1430, the guests were checking their neural implants, scanning for news updates, traffic reports, anything that might explain the delay. By 1500 hours, Fernan stood alone at the altar while the holographic flowers wilted in a programmed display of sympathetic sorrow. Thessaly Drakon, heiress to the Drakon biosynthetics empire, daughter of the legendary counselor Varek Drakon, the most beautiful dragon woman in the entire Veriscon sector, with her elegant curved horns and shimmering golden scales, never arrived. The message came 3 hours later, delivered to his personal communicator in text so cold it might have been generated by an artificial intelligence. "I cannot do this. Do not ask why." 7 words. 7 words to end 2 years of courtship, 18 months of engagement, and a lifetime of dreams that Fernan Hale had been foolish enough to believe in. He was a mechanic, a drone repair specialist from the industrial districts of Neon Low-Fall City. He had met Thessaly when her personal transport had malfunctioned in the lower sectors, far from the gleaming spires where her kind dwelt. She had been stranded, irritated, and utterly magnificent, her golden scales shimmering with frustration, her emerald hair cascading over shoulders that bore the weight of corporate dynasties. "Can you fix it?" she had demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no. "I can fix anything," Fernan had replied, and something in his quiet confidence had made her pause. He had fixed her transport in 20 minutes. She had stayed for 3 hours, asking questions about his work, his life, his dreams. When she finally left, she had looked at him with those piercing blue eyes, so startlingly human in her draconic face, and said, "You are not like the others." The other mechanics, the other men. That had been the beginning. 2 years of secret meetings, of stolen moments in the shadow of corporate towers, 2 years of her family's disapproval, of whispered scandals in the social feeds, of Fernan learning to navigate a world that had never wanted him, 2 years of loving someone so far above his station that the very concept seemed like science fiction, and then she was gone. For months afterward, Fernan searched for answers. He called her private frequency, disconnected. He visited the Drakon corporate headquarters, removed by security. He sent messages through every channel he could think of. All returned undelivered. Eventually, he stopped searching. Eventually, he accepted that whatever had happened, Thessaly Drakon had made her choice. She had chosen her world over his. She had chosen status over love. She had chosen everything that Fernan could never give her. He returned to Neon Low-Fall City. He returned to his workshop, his drones, his quiet life among the forgotten people of the industrial sectors. He buried his heart beneath layers of grease and circuitry, and he told himself that it was enough. 7 years passed, and then, on a night when the acid rain fell in sheets and the neon signs flickered with the exhaustion of a city that never truly slept, Fernan Hale heard a voice he had never expected to hear again. Neon Low-Fall City had earned its name through decades of decay. Once a gleaming metropolis of technological wonder, it had fallen, literally and figuratively, into the shadow of the corporate spires that now blocked out its sky. The upper levels belonged to the wealthy, the powerful, the genetically enhanced. The lower levels belonged to everyone else. Fernand navigated the rain-slicked streets with the ease of long familiarity, his worn tactical jacket doing little to keep out the moisture that seemed to seep into everything in this part of the city. His silver hair, prematurely grey from years of exposure to industrial chemicals, plastered itself to his forehead as he made his way home from a late repair job. At 42, Fernand Hale had the look of a man who had seen too much and expected too little. The lines around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and forgotten dreams. The calluses on his hands told stories of honest work and quiet dignity. He wore his poverty like armor, taking pride in what he had built from nothing. The alley he cut through was one of hundreds in the Lowfall district, a narrow canyon of corrugated metal and failing holographic advertisements. Homeless figures huddled in doorways, their faces illuminated by the ghostly glow of malfunctioning implants. Fernand knew most of them by name. He had fixed their broken technology, shared his food when he could spare it, and treated them with the dignity that the rest of the city had forgotten they deserved. He was halfway through the alley when he heard it, a voice, hoarse and broken, asking for credits. "Please," the voice said, "anything you can spare." Fernand paused. Something about the voice tugged at the edges of his memory, a half-forgotten melody that his heart recognized before his mind could catch up. He turned toward the sound, reaching into his pocket for the handful of credits he always kept for moments like this. And then he saw her. She was huddled against the wall, her once magnificent wings folded tight against her body. The golden scales that had gleamed like sunlight now appeared dull and weathered, marked with the scars of surgical removal and crude prosthetic reattachment. Her elegant horns, those curved crowns that had once marked her noble lineage, now seemed like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Her emerald hair hung in matted tangles, and her clothes, clearly salvaged from donation bins, hung loose on a frame that had grown thin from hunger. But her eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had haunted his dreams for 7 years, those eyes were unmistakable. Thessaly. The name escaped his lips before he could stop it. He watched her flinch, watched her try to shrink deeper into the shadows, watched her face contort with an emotion that might have been shame or fear or something far more complicated. "You have the wrong person," she said, her voice deliberately flat. "I do not know anyone by that name. Thessaly Drakon." Fernand took a step closer, his heart pounding against his ribs like it was trying to escape. "I would know you anywhere, in any condition, in any light." She looked up at him then, and in her eyes he saw something break, some wall she had built to protect herself from exactly this moment. "Fernand," she whispered, "you should not be here. You should not see me like this." 7 years. His voice cracked on the words. 7 years, Thessaly. No explanation, no goodbye. Just 7 words in a message and then nothing. "I know." Tears streamed down her scaled cheeks, cutting channels through the grime of street living. "I know what I did to you. I know it was unforgivable." "Then why?" The question contained 7 years of grief, 7 years of confusion, 7 years of a wound that had never properly healed. "Why did you leave me standing at that altar like a fool?" Thessaly opened her mouth to respond. But before she could speak, a commotion erupted at the end of the alley. 3 figures in corporate security armor appeared, their helmets scanning the shadows with infrared sensors. "Scan complete," one of them announced. "Target identified. Thessaly Drakon. You are wanted for questioning regarding outstanding debts to the Syndicate Collective. Come with us peacefully." Thessaly's face went pale beneath her scales. "No," she breathed. "Not them. Anyone but them." Fernand did not think. He did not weigh options or calculate risks. He simply moved, placing himself between Thessaly and the approaching security officers with an instinct born of something deeper than logic. "The lady is not going anywhere with you," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. The lead officer tilted his helmet. "Human male, unregistered, interfering with corporate collection operations. Step aside or be designated as a secondary target." "Fernand, please!" Thessaly gripped his arm. "Do not do this. They will hurt you. They can try." Fernand reached into his jacket and pulled out a device that looked like a remote control, crossed with a musical instrument. "I did not spend 20 years fixing machinery without learning a few tricks." He pressed 3 buttons in rapid succession. Throughout the alley, dormant repair drones, units he had fixed over the years and stationed throughout the district, hummed to life. Within seconds, the narrow space was filled with the whir of rotors and the glow of operational lights. 17 drones, Fernand said conversationally, most of them equipped with welding torches. "Now I am a peaceful man, but these machines have been programmed to protect the residents of this alley from any threat. And right now, gentlemen, you are looking very threatening." The security officers hesitated. Their helmets exchanged silent communications, calculating odds, assessing risks. Finally, the lead officer stepped back. "This is not over, Drakon," he said. "The syndicate always collects its debts." They retreated into the rain, and Fernand waited until they had disappeared before lowering his controller. The drones returned to their stations, settling back into apparent dormancy. "You are insane," Thessaly said, but there was something in her voice that might have been admiration. "They could have killed you." "Probably." Fernand turned to face her, and for the first time in 7 years he allowed himself to really look at her. Past the poverty and the scars, past the evidence of suffering that had rewritten her life, she was still the woman who had stopped his heart in a broken-down transport all those years ago. "But I have spent 7 years wondering what happened to you. I am not about to let some corporate thugs take you before I get my answers. Fernand, come with me." He extended his hand, the same hand that had once held hers as they planned their future, the same hand that had waited empty at the altar. "You can tell me everything, or nothing, but at least let me get you somewhere safe." Thessaly stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Fernand's workshop occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the Low-Fall district. It was not much, a cluttered space filled with salvaged equipment, half-repaired drones, and the accumulated debris of 2 decades in the repair business. But it was dry, it was warm, and it was home. He led Thessaly inside, clearing a space on his worn sofa and draping a clean blanket around her shoulders. She accepted his ministrations without protest, too exhausted to maintain the pride that had once defined her. "When did you last eat?" he asked, moving toward his small kitchen area. "I do not remember." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yesterday, perhaps. The day before." Fernand heated a container of nutrient broth and brought it to her, watching as she drank it in careful sips. The dragon people had different nutritional requirements than humans, but protein was protein, and she clearly needed whatever he could provide. "Thank you," she said when the container was empty. "You did not have to do this." "No," he agreed, settling into a chair across from her. "I did not." The silence between them was heavy with 7 years of unasked questions. Finally, Thessaly spoke. "The morning of our wedding, I received a visit from my father's enemies." She stared at her hands as she spoke, unable to meet his eyes. "The Syndicate Collective. They had been investigating him for years, gathering evidence of illegal genetic experimentation. They had enough to destroy him, to destroy our entire family." "I remember the stories," Fernand said carefully. "The Drakon scandal. It was all over the news feeds for months after I abandoned you." Thessaly's voice was bitter. You can say it after you left, he corrected gently. I never thought of it as abandonment. I thought... He paused, searching for words. I thought you had simply come to your senses, realized that a lowly mechanic was not worth the sacrifice. Oh, Fernand. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. It was the opposite. The syndicate made it very clear. If I married you, they would expand their investigation. They would find ways to implicate you in my father's crimes. They would destroy you, along with us. He stared at her, his mind struggling to reframe 7 years of grief. You left me to protect me. I left you to save you. She finally met his eyes, and he saw the truth there, the terrible, beautiful, devastating truth of a sacrifice he had never known she made. You were the one good thing in my life, Fernand, the one pure thing that was not tainted by my family's corruption. I could not bear to watch them destroy you the way they destroyed everything else. What happened, he asked, after you left? The syndicate took everything anyway. Her laugh was hollow. My father was arrested. Our assets were seized. My mother... She swallowed hard. She did not survive the shame. Heart failure, the doctors said, but I know better. She simply stopped wanting to live. Thessaly. They needed someone to blame. She continued as if she had not heard him, the words pouring out like poison from a wound. Someone to punish publicly. I was the obvious choice, the rebellious daughter who had tried to marry beneath her station. They stripped me of my citizenship, my identity, my resources. They even... She paused, her hand moving unconsciously to her back, where her wings emerged from her shoulder blades. They took your wings, Fernand said softly, understanding now the scars he had noticed, the crude prosthetics that had replaced what must have been magnificent natural appendages. Wing removal is the traditional punishment for disgraced dragon people nobility. Her voice was flat, clinical, as if she were describing something that had happened to someone else. It is meant to be a permanent reminder of our fall from grace. These prosthetics, she flexed the artificial wings weakly, were salvaged from a medical waste facility. They barely function. Fernand felt rage building in his chest, rage at the syndicate, at the corporate system that had crushed her, at a society that could treat anyone with such cruelty. But more than rage, he felt grief. Grief for the woman she had been, for the future they had lost, for 7 years of suffering that she had endured alone. I spent the first 2 years fighting, Thessaly continued, trying to clear my name, to prove that I had nothing to do with my father's crimes. But the syndicate controls the courts, the news feeds, the truth itself. Eventually I ran out of resources, ran out of allies, ran out of hope. I came to Neon Lowfall because it was the one place where no one would think to look for the former heiress of the Draken Empire. How long have you been on the streets? 3 years. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Give or take. The days blur together after a while. 3 years. 3 years of sleeping in alleys, of begging for credits, of being invisible in a city that had once bowed at her feet. Fernand thought of all the times he had walked these streets, never knowing that the woman he had loved, the woman he still loved, he realized with sudden clarity, had been suffering just blocks away. You should have found me, he said. You should have come to me. How could I? Her voice cracked. After what I did. I broke your heart, Fernand. I humiliated you in front of everyone. I walked away without a word of explanation and left you to wonder what you had done wrong. How could I possibly come to you and ask for help? Because I would have given it. He moved to sit beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body, close enough to smell the rain in her hair. I would have given you anything, Thessaly, then and now. That has never changed. She looked at him with an expression of such raw vulnerability that it took his breath away. You should hate me. I tried, he admitted, for a while. But hate takes energy, and eventually I realized I would rather spend that energy remembering the good parts. The way you laughed when I told terrible jokes. The way you looked at the sunset like you were seeing it for the first time. The way you made me feel like I mattered, even when the whole universe said I did not. Fernan. Stay, he said, just for tonight. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. She was asleep within minutes, exhaustion finally claiming what her pride had fought to deny. Fernan covered her with another blanket and sat watching her breathe, wondering how the universe could be both so cruel and so kind in the same moment. The days that followed were strange and wonderful and difficult in ways that Fernan had not anticipated. Having Thessaly in his home again, having her presence in his life again, was like rediscovering a piece of himself that he had forgotten was missing. But 7 years had changed them both. The idealistic young mechanic who had believed that love could conquer anything had become a pragmatic middle-aged man who understood that the universe rarely rewarded optimism. The privileged heiress who had never known hardship had become a survivor who flinched at sudden sounds and hoarded food as if each meal might be her last. They rebuilt their relationship carefully, like two people learning to walk again after a long illness. Some days were good, filled with conversation and laughter, and moments that felt almost like the old times. Other days were harder, shadowed by memories of what had been lost and fears of what might come. Fernan taught Thessaly the basics of drone repair, watching with quiet satisfaction as her nimble fingers learned to navigate the delicate circuitry. She had always been quick, one of the things he had loved about her, and she picked up the skills faster than any apprentice he had ever trained. "You could have a career in this," he told her one evening, watching as she successfully reassembled a navigation module that had stumped him for days. "Perhaps." She smiled, and for a moment he saw a glimpse of the woman she had been before the fall. "It is strange, is it not? All those years I spent learning corporate finance and political strategy, and the most useful skills I have ever acquired are the ones you taught me in a workshop." The syndicate had not forgotten her. Twice more their security forces appeared in the Lowfall district, searching for the disgraced dragon woman who owed them a debt that could never truly be repaid. Each time, Fernand's network of drones and street contacts gave them enough warning to hide her safely away. "You cannot keep doing this," Thessaly said after the third close call. "They will not stop. Eventually they will find me, and when they do, they will punish anyone who helped me. Let them try." "Fernan." She took his hands in hers, her scaled fingers warm against his calloused palms. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself for me, not again. It is not a sacrifice if it is my choice. It is always a sacrifice." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I left you once to protect you from my family's destruction. I will not stay and watch you be destroyed because of me." The argument that followed was their first real fight since her return, a clash of wills that left them both exhausted and raw. In the end, they reached a compromise. Thessaly would stay long enough to recover her strength and establish a new identity, and then she would decide her own path forward. Fernan reached out to contacts he had cultivated over the years, forgers, information brokers, smugglers who owed him favors. Within a month, Thessaly had new identification documents, a clean credit history, and passage arranged to the outer colonies, where the syndicate's reach was weakest. "You do not have to go," he said, the night before her departure, as they sat together on his workshop roof, watching the neon lights flicker against the perpetual clouds. "I know." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her artificial wings folding around them both like a protective cocoon. "But I think I need to. Because of the syndicate. Because of me." She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw a clarity that had not been there before, a sense of purpose that transcended fear or gratitude. "For 7 years I have been running running from my past, running from my family's legacy, running from the person I used to be. I think it is time I stopped running and started building something new. You could build something new here. Could I? Her smile was sad but genuine. Or would I always be the ghost of the woman you loved, the reminder of a future that was stolen from us? Fernand wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that they could make it work, that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. But he was not the naive young man who had stood at an altar believing in fairy tales. He was a mechanic who understood that some machines could not be repaired. They could only be rebuilt from the ground up. "I loved you," he said quietly. "I want you to know that. Whatever happens, wherever you go, I loved you. I know." She cupped his face in her hands, her blue eyes holding his. "And I loved you. I still do, in a way that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the person you helped me become. But we cannot go back, Fernand. We can only go forward. Forward does not have to mean apart. Sometimes it does." She kissed his forehead, a gesture of benediction rather than passion. "You gave me my life back, Fernand Hale. Now let me figure out what to do with it." The morning of her departure dawned grey and rainy, as if neon low-fall city itself was weeping. Fernand accompanied Thessaly to the transport hub where a cargo freighter would carry her to the outer colonies, to a new life, a new identity, a future that did not include him. She wore simple traveler's clothes, her emerald hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her prosthetic wings were folded tight against her back, covered by a weatherproof jacket that concealed their artificial nature. She looked, he thought, like any ordinary refugee fleeing a difficult past, and perhaps that was exactly what she was. "I had something made for you," Fernand said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small device, a compact emergency beacon disguised as a piece of jewelry. "If you ever need me, anywhere in the galaxy, press the activation crystal and I will find you." Thessaly took the beacon with trembling hands. "Fernand, I know you need to do this alone. I know you need to find your own path. But I also know that everyone deserves to have someone they can call when the universe gets too heavy. Let me be that person for you. Not as a lover, not as a reminder of what we lost, just as someone who cares whether you live or die." She fastened the beacon around her wrist, its crystal glinting in the dim light of the transport hub. "You always were too good for me. Funny, I always thought it was the other way around." The boarding announcement echoed through the hub, calling passengers to the freighter that would carry them away from everything they knew. Thessaly turned to face Fernand one last time, her expression a complicated mix of gratitude, regret, and something that might have been hope. "Do you hate me?" she asked, the same question that had haunted them both for 7 years. Fernand considered his answer carefully. The truth was complicated, a tapestry woven from threads of love and grief, understanding and resentment, forgiveness, and the scars that forgiveness could never fully heal. "No," he said finally, his eyes glistening with tears he did not try to hide. "But it took me 7 years to stop waiting." Thessaly nodded, as if that was exactly the answer she had expected, and perhaps the only answer that could have set them both free. "Goodbye, Fernand Hale," she said. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for waiting even when you should not have. Thank you for forgiving even when I did not deserve it. Thank you for being the one person who saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. Goodbye, Thessaly Drakon." He reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers gentle against her golden scales. "Go build something beautiful." She embraced him then, not as a lover but as a survivor, embracing another survivor. Two people who had been broken by the universe and had somehow found the strength to keep going. And then she was gone, walking toward the freighter without looking back, her steps steady and sure for the first time in 7 years. Fernan watched until the freighter lifted off, until its lights disappeared into the eternal grey of neon low-fall sky. Then he turned and walked back into the city that had been his home for so long, a city of broken dreams and forgotten people and quiet heroism that no one would ever celebrate. 3 years passed. Fernan Hale expanded his workshop into a community centre, a place where the forgotten people of Neon Lowfall could come for repairs, for food, for simple human connection in a city that had forgotten what humanity meant. He trained apprentices, organized neighborhood patrols, and quietly became the kind of leader who led by example rather than proclamation. He never married. He dated occasionally. There was a kind Vesperian nurse who worked at the underground clinic, and a sharp-tongued human journalist who wrote about corporate corruption, but nothing ever took root. Some part of him, he suspected, would always belong to a woman with golden scales and emerald hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. The beacon he had given her never activated. He was not sure whether to be relieved or disappointed. Then, one evening, as he stood on his workshop roof, watching the sunset paint the clouds in shades of orange and purple that even the perpetual smog could not entirely dim, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A dragon woman soared above the city, her wings catching the fading light like living gold. She moved with grace and confidence, banking and turning with the easy skill of someone who had been flying for years. Her emerald hair streamed behind her like a banner, and even from this distance, Fernan could see that her wings were no longer the crude prosthetics she had worn when she left. These were new wings, elegant, advanced, the product of technology that had not existed 3 years ago. Someone had given Thessaly Drakon her wings back. She did not land. She did not approach. She simply circled once over the Lowfall district, over the workshop that had sheltered her, over the streets that had witnessed her lowest moment. And then she was gone, disappearing into the sunset like a dream he could not quite remember. Fernan stood on his roof long after the light had faded, a smile on his weathered face. They would probably never see each other again. Their love had not conquered all obstacles, had not led to a happy ending where past hurts were forgotten and futures merged into one. But the love had been real, it had been true, and in some strange way it had saved them both. Some loves, he reflected, were not meant to last forever. Some existed only to transform us, to show us who we could become, to teach us lessons that we could learn in no other way. The love between a human mechanic and a dragon woman heiress had never been practical. It had defied social conventions, challenged corporate hierarchies, and ultimately fallen victim to forces larger than either of them could control. But it had also proven something important, that connection between souls could transcend species and status, that compassion was stronger than cruelty, and that even in a universe designed to crush the vulnerable, kindness could still survive. Fernan Hale returned to his workshop as the neon signs flickered to life around him, illuminating the endless rain with colors that seemed almost hopeful. Tomorrow he would wake up and continue the work he had chosen, helping the forgotten, fixing the broken, building something meaningful in a city that had lost its meaning long ago. Somewhere out there, Thessaly Drakon was doing the same. And perhaps that was the greatest love story of all, not two people living happily ever after, but two people learning to live happily apart, carrying pieces of each other in their hearts as they built new futures from the wreckage of their shared past. Some people leave us not because they do not love us, but because they believe that loving means letting go. Not every love was meant to continue. Some exist only to transform us and teach us how to move forward. The end.